Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Análisis Financiero. Today we have a very special guest, Pat Dorsey, who is a member of the advisory committee of Magallanes Value Investor. Pat is also founder of Dorsey Asset Management and the author of a terrific book on competitive advantages, the little book that builds wealth. Good morning, Pat.
Thanks for talking to me.
Thank you, it's a great pleasure. Okay, let's go, Pat, straight to the point. How can you accurately identify companies that are great today and are likely to be great over the years to come?
Well, the key word you said there was likely, because there is no certainty in forecasting the future. And so what we did when I was at Morningstar is we looked at all the businesses that had returned their on invested capital above cost of capital for more than 15 years. So this was a group of companies that had defied the laws of economic gravity. And we said, what are their common characteristics? Because if we can identify those common characteristics in businesses today, those businesses should have a higher probability in the future of having returns on capital that exceed their cost of capital and their peers. And so that's really the basis for things, is qualitative characteristics that are inherent to the business. It's very much a forward-looking exercise based on the characteristics of the business, not just based on the financial data.
Companies that compound high rates of return or enjoy a stable market share may have a competitive advantage then. What are the most common sources of competitive advantage?
Yeah, well, so I think there's four common characteristics you can look for. One would be an intangible asset that gives you pricing power. So you can think of Tiffany, for example, where you pay more for the little blue box than you do for any other kind of ring. You can think of patents or licenses. You can have a switching cost advantage. If you've ever thought of trying to switch out from Microsoft Excel, or if you have an Oracle database, switching is very, very difficult, and that gives those companies pricing power. You can have a network effect, like you see with Visa, MasterCard, eBay, Facebook, where the more people that are on the platform, the more valuable it becomes. And then you can have a cost advantage, where you simply do something cheaper than everybody else. The key common characteristic of all of these is it gives the business pricing power. Because a business that cannot raise prices and not lose tons of customers usually does not have a competitive advantage.
Well, there are dramatic differences among industries in terms of rivalry or growth. What are the most likely industries to find economic moats?
This is a fabulous question, because I think one of the most important things to recognize as an investor is some industries are just harder than others. You have CEOs or consultants talking about we want to be the best in our industry. Being the tallest midget does not make you a good basketball player. Being the best auto parts supplier probably does not make you a good business, because you still are selling to a very concentrated group of customers, the auto manufacturers, and they're going to exert enormous pricing power on you. Auto parts, airlines, mining, chemicals, they're just hard. And so as an investor, why play where it's hard? Why not go where it's easier? Looking for businesses in data processing, in vertical market software, in many industries where it's simply easier to create competitive advantage, and the competitive environment is more conducive to creating high returns on capital.
That is quite fascinating. But moving into a more quantitative approach, how do you measure the size of the moat?
Wow. Well, I don't know that there is a quantitative way to do it, frankly, because a business that may have, say, a 40% return on capital, if that is not sustainable, and if they cannot reinvest back in the business, it's not a very good competitive advantage. On the other hand, a business that may only have a 15% return on capital, and so it's not returning as much on the capital base, but the duration is very long, because it would be enormously difficult to compete with that company. For example, a pipeline. If you have a pipeline buried underneath the ground that might be transporting refined products from the refinery to the port, it is a very difficult asset to replicate. But it's not going to be returning 40%, it's going to be returning 15%. So what you need to think about qualitatively as an investor is how hard would it be if someone gave me $50 million to compete with this business?
Okay, that's very interesting. It is easy to confuse very good news or the stellar shorter performance of managers with moats. How do you identify mistaken moats?
Yep. So I think the key here is thinking about what is permanent and what is ephemeral, right? Technology, for example. Think about many years ago, you probably had a phone from Nokia or Motorola. And switching that phone was very easy. A new phone came along, it was smaller, it did more things, you said, fine, I buy the new phone. Today, if I tried to take away your Android phone or your iOS phone, you would probably try to hit me because it would be very difficult for you to switch because you had many different emails and applications locked into that system. And so that software locks you in. So technology itself is usually not a moat because the world is full of smart engineers. What one smart engineer can create, another one can do better. Another one that people often mistake are hot products. You may have a fashion product or a restaurant concept. It's very popular, very popular. You don't have to put much capital into it, and so it returns a lot on its investment base. However, you have to ask yourself, how easy would it be to compete with this? How likely are these customers to be there 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years? Because when you invest, you are not investing based on today's results. Your value will be created by tomorrow's results.
Yeah. And well, in that line, what about brands? Do you think brands are a source of competitive advantage?
They are, but they're getting tougher. And so I think it's important to think about what does the brand do for you, right? So the Tiffany brand, which we mentioned earlier, that is a luxury brand about exclusivity. And so what Tiffany needs to do is maintain an aura of exclusivity, right? If you have a brand like Moody's or GfK or Nielsen, that brand confers legitimacy. People will trust a bond rating from Moody's much more so than from Dorsey's bond rating service. Now, the brands that are based on what we call low search costs, habit. I like this beer. I like this ketchup. Those are ones I think that are going to be more difficult going forward because the barrier to entry has come down. You think about 10, 15 years ago, you wanted to build a big brand, you had to spend a lot of money on TV networks, on billboards, and magazine ads. Today, you put up a YouTube video, and suddenly you reach millions of people. And that's what happened when you've seen Gillette. Gillette, one of Buffett's original inevitables, losing market share to a 5-year-old company called Dollar Shave Club. That could not have happened 15 years ago.
That's clear. I think barriers to entry are already key in the quality analysis of a business. Moving into a different arena, Peter Lynch always said that he wanted business that an idiot could run because sooner or later one will. However, Bill Thorndike, in his recent book, The Outsiders, he somehow emphasizes the role of CEOs as chief capital allocators. Right? What is your view on the value of management when talking about competitive advantage?
Well, the short answer is it depends. The longer answer is it depends on the business, right? And so what I would say is you think about the analytical pie, right? You have a pie and you say, what is my research time or how much time do I spend on different attributes of the business? And so for some companies, management matters a lot. For some, it matters less. So, for example, there's a wonderful German business called MTU Aero that makes key subsystems for jet engines. Pratt & Whitney for the most part, as well as one of the main engines on the A320. Management there does not have to do a lot of capital allocation because the capital allocation is done by Boeing and Airbus. They decide what airplane to build, then they say Rolls-Royce or Pratt or GE, build the engine for me, and then they go to MTU and say, build this part. Their job is to do things very efficiently. However, if you are in a business where the industry is consolidating, perhaps, is very fragmented, and you are buying new distribution platforms to bolt on to the existing one, M&A is fraught with risk. And there, management matters enormously, because if they overpay for assets, you will not get a good return as an investor.
That's clear. Imagine you have, let's say, not that fragmented industry. You have incumbents, protecting their moats. Are you able to identify early rising stars, outsiders in the industry?
Ooh, that's a tough one. So that there, if you're thinking about a very consolidated industry, generally speaking, the more consolidated an industry, people tend to play nice with each other because they like having big market share. They like not competing too much on price. However, you see perhaps in the auto industry, which is very consolidated, they don't play so nice with each other, right? Because it's a commodity product at the end of the day. And if BMW sells me a car, I don't buy a car from Hyundai, right? I can't buy two cars. Well, maybe I could buy two cars, but it's a zero-sum game, right? So in that case, you have companies like Tesla coming in, but typically consolidated industries, very broadly speaking, tend to stay that way. Where the rising stars come in is where you have some kind of disruptive change in the industry, and then there's the opportunity for the incumbent, for a new entrant to come in. But in a very stable arena, let's go back to our branding example, right? Very consolidated with Unilever, with P&G, businesses like this, Reckitt Benckiser. For many years, very consolidated. What changed? The internet. The ability for me as an entrepreneur to reach millions of consumers without having to spend millions of euros on broadcast TV. That was the disruptive change that perhaps over the next 20 years will make that a less consolidated industry than it was before.
If you had to choose one of the top S&P 500 companies for the next 10 years, Google, Facebook, Amazon and the likes, which one would you choose? Which one has the wider moat?
Probably Amazon. Amazon or Google. I mean, I would say it's a competition, but in Amazon's case, I think people, believe it or not, are undervaluing probably Amazon Web Services. While the retail business is difficult to replicate, that is going to be harder going down the road. Amazon was one of the first companies to really think carefully about building out a very detailed and well-functioning distribution network, but you are seeing manufacturers trying to replicate that so they can go direct to the consumer. You are seeing the offline retailers in the US replicate this. That's going to be harder. Amazon Web Services, that is going to be much harder to replicate because the key there is not that Amazon has a whole bunch of servers. So what? The key there is the developer community. Let's go back to Microsoft. The value of Windows was the developer community that was all building software to run on the Windows platform. Amazon has created the same thing. Millions of developers writing things to run on Amazon Web Services platform. And I think that when you think of computing power as a utility, you think about how big that business could be as we get things off of our premises and up into the cloud. I think it will be very big.
Okay. We will see that in 10 years' time.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Come back and ask me. Hold me to account.
Okay. Thank you very much, Pat.
Thank you.
It's been a real pleasure to have you
so
here
much
today at Análisis Financiero.